Oh, actually, you wanted me sharing the screen on that, didn't you?
That's okay. I think we're live on Facebook now, Andy.
You caught me by surprise, but mate, you'll have to allow me to share screens too while we're here.
Hey, mate, we're on. How are you going, mate? Good to see you. I know we're a little bit late. A little bit late today. We have a little technical glitch, but we've made it. We've made it. I'm making Andy a co-host. So, mate, whenever you're ready to kick off with the cool video, it is wine time. That's for sure. I'll pour my wine.
I'll get mine together as well. I'll see you in a few seconds.
All right, mate.
It always pumps me up, that music.
And we're back. Justin and Kerry Lee, Ian Cook, a few other people online. So thanks for joining us, gang. Sorry we're a bit late to the party today, but, technically we're early in Queensland and maybe a bit late in New South Wales and Victoria, but great to have everyone on today for another Wine and Wisdom. So, but Andy, it's Friday.
Right,
cheers, mate. Yes, cheers to everyone at home. If you're drinking early, if you're 4 o'clock in Queensland and you're at work, well, sneak one. It's Friday afternoon. If it's 5 o'clock somewhere else, then you're good to go. But welcome along. Great to have everyone here. And mate, exciting week this week. The budget came out, or interesting times. So we're going to probably spend most of the discussion today, this afternoon, this evening, in and around the budget, I expect. So that's there's a lot of good things to sort of debrief, and I might get you to sort of kick that one off, what it means to, the economy, investing, ideas, pontifications, concerns. I've got a few things I wouldn't mind talking about as well. But for those who are listening in, joining us maybe for the first time or dialing in, Alison is saying hello. G'day, Alison. For the first time, Wine and Wisdom, Andy Fenton, finance and markets extraordinaire, 20 years in banking and in the world of shares and equities, and all things investing in that space. Now runs his own boutique financial planning and advising firm. And myself, Jason Whitten, 20 years in the real estate game across Australia and New Zealand. We met about, I think it's 4 years ago now, doing a business accelerator program called the Kerwin Ray, or the K2 Elite program, and hit it off. A little bit of friendly competition between shares and property. I've enjoyed the education you've given me over the last 4 years about the world of equities and shares, mate, and I hope it's reciprocal. So that for those who are listening in, that's a little bit of background about us. Wine and Wisdom came from the idea of Andy and I wanting to support our tribes, our networks. In Corona times, we thought every Friday we'll debrief because things were happening so fast. We've enjoyed the catch up, to have a wine together and have a yarn, and we've built a little bit of a audience and following on the Wine and Wisdom days. So thanks for those guys joining us again and supporting the Wine and Wisdom afternoon. So that's the little intro from me, Andy, mate. But really want to sort of kick this one off with you this week, mate. The budget. $1 trillion. That's a big headline number. Where to from here? Actually, I heard this thing the other day, which might be a good way to set this up, right? Andy, I got a quiz for you. If we were to put on the spot, put him on the spot. If you were to grab $1 bills, Australia doesn't have many more, but there's American $1 bills. If you were to grab $1 bills and put them end to end, and you had $1 million $1 bills, how long would $1 million $1 bills be stacked end to end, Andy? Any idea?
I would say probably around about 2.5 million inches.
Well, I know the answer in terms of old-fashioned, not metric, but what's it called when you measure in inches? What is that called? The imperial version, right?
Yep.
So it's 7.5 foot long. So 7.5 feet long. Dollar bills stacked end to end is $1 million, right? As in, squished together, on top, right? So the version of the world, just get your head around the size difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion. That's what I want to really communicate. So $1 million, 7.5 foot long. $1 billion, Andy, stacked on top of each other or end to end or whatever it is. How long? What do you reckon?
How long? I reckon it'd be a pallet load. So what did you say? Seven feet was the first one, was a million. So a billion
is a million.
Is 1,000 times that. So 7,000 feet.
So 76 miles or something like that, like insane, right? The difference is like just, and then when you go a trillion, which is 1,000 billion, that goes around the earth 2 times. So imagine that, the dollar bill stacked up end to end, going around the earth 2 times. It's $1 trillion coming into the Australian economy in the next, 3 years?
Mate,
2 years?
I'm just pulling up because I've actually seen this before, and so this is an image which basically goes to illustrate the same thing. Let me show that I'm right here. So there we go. We've got the million on the left.
Yeah.
We've got the 100 million. Then we've got the billion, and then we got the 1 trillion. Which
how's
is
that?
And each of those, if you can see that down the bottom, that's a guy standing there, and they're basically over the top of his head. Yeah. Well, that's it. So it's interesting. So, the version of the world, Andy, $1 trillion coming into our, our local economy. Mate, what's it look like? What have you taken away? I know you said, a lot of people that you take some advice from and bits and pieces. What does it look like for you in the budget? Now, Judy said to speak up. So maybe our audio is a little bit low here. I'll just make sure that that's not the case. Just make sure you're tuned up a little bit, Andy. But thanks for the shout out, Judy. But mate. So tell us about the budget, mate, and the spending. Where are you? What are you seeing? What do you know right now? Because I know you've got some amazing connections in the world of, the world of finance and money, and what it means to, the budget. Yep. It depends on how granular we want to get, but maybe we keep it at reasonably headline stuff, because most people are going to see the data come out, and we can chat to some of the points that have come through, and some of them haven't been legislated yet. The tax cuts are being pushed through, but my overall view of the budget is that, look, it's putting a lot of money in. Was it crazy and was it unexpected? Not overly.
Not really.
Genius. Yep. Not really. Like in a lot of ways, it was actually a little bit underwhelming, more so from a technical perspective. But we've also got to take into consideration first budget. God, what a time to be doing it. So I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying that from a technical perspective and potentially a tools perspective, it wasn't too crazy. They literally just brought forward legislation that had already been legislated. So it can go through that. Well, probably that's a good place to start, because
let's do it, mate. Let's do it. Yep.
We do have the tax cuts, and I'll bring these up for you so I can talk to them while we're here. All right. So so that basically what they've done, and let me get to the next one, is they basically, so we've got a sliding tax scale. So for those people who haven't seen this before, our tax scale it goes up based on how much we earn, right? So between $0 and $18,000 odd, we've got a 0% tax rate.
So effectively what they've done is they've raised the tax rate, the lowest tax rate of 19%. They've raised that from, it used to cut out at 37,500. Now they've taken it up to 45,000. Right.
So that's good.
There's a tax cut in it for everybody there. And they've done the same thing here. They've gone from 45 now up to 120 at the 32% tax rate. So anybody who sits there is going to get a significant, a decrease in the amount of tax that they pay. But then there's these other little things, the low income tax offset and the low to medium income tax offset. So here's a little bit of tricky stuff. So it's probably best just to do it in graphical format. So this is down the bottom here, and you might struggle to see it a little bit, but effectively we've got 30,000 is the starting point along the bottom axis, and it goes up.
You can zoom in a bit, can't you, on your iPad? If that's on your iPad, you can pinch and zoom. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So effectively, if we're in these brackets, this shows how much you're going to save based on the line to the left-hand side. So if you're earning 60,000, you can see here that you're basically going to be $1,100 or thereabouts better off from a tax perspective. Right. And as we go up and we get above 93,000 or above 90,000, then the tax saving increases to just under 2,500 for those people who are up to 129,000 a year. Now, the low income tax offset and the low to medium income tax offset the low to medium tax offset was due to be wiped out when the second round of the tax cuts came. So we were in stage one already, and stage two of last budget's tax cuts weren't meant to come in until next year.
Yeah, right.
And effectively what was going to happen is which is now the tax cut, they've just brought them forward 12 months. Right. So again, not crazy ingenious. They just said, well, let's bring the tax cuts forward. And so what ends up happening is that low to medium tax offset, right, that'll go after next year, right? So when basically in 12 months time, when this new threshold comes in, that'll disappear. So this is the effect, right? Once you actually take that low to medium income tax offset out, right? So you can see the dotted line there, which is the tax savings that we're going to get immediately in tranche number one as this comes through. But once they wipe out that low to medium tax offset, well, then everyone earning between sort of 36,000 to 90,000 basically doesn't really get a tax cut anymore. So there's a year's worth of tax cuts in there when you really look through it. So there's a little bit of funky numbers in there, which I thought was really interesting. So you're going to hear them wax lyrical about it, but realistically for 12 months, you're going to be in the blue. And then after that, you're going to be in the red. So when they remove that low to medium tax offset, effectively, there aren't really much tax breaks for that low to medium bracket. So that'll be interesting how that gets tackled and argued moving forward. But as it stands right now, this is what the position will be. So there will be more money in people's pockets. But I thought interesting just to bring that up because it's not exactly what it seems to be. So here's the thing, right? So Jace, this is where for business owners who are watching this now, they might be going, okay, well that's good. Means more money in our employees' pockets. What do you think is the thing that business owners are going to go, shit, about this?
I don't know. Well, maybe it'll be easier to employ someone from elsewhere. I mean, I know there's some motivation or some benefits to employing now. It'll be the cost of employment will be lower. Maybe.
Well, how does this? Let me ask a different question. How does the government facilitate putting more money back into people's pockets?
Well, through the employer system, right? So it's easier to
adjust everybody's tax. So
we
now have to go through our employees and adjust the withholding tax. So adjusting the credits into our team members' bank accounts. That's going to be interesting. Right?
That's a big job.
It's a big job. So the bookkeepers and accountants around Australia are going to be looking and ripping their hair out, going, "Oh my God, I'm about to field 25 million calls over the next few days.
Well, that's actually a good one because, the reality is too, especially in my world, lots of people have got PAYG variations going on in property land. So, it's important to get them right because the tax department doesn't like it when you get it wrong. There's a heads up. Gang, make sure you have a look at what that might look like for you. Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely one to and as employees, you might need to remind your employer. It's going to be a little bit of a shit fight to manage all of this because again, it's already legislated, so that's in play right now. That'll cause a little bit of chaos and misunderstanding and debits and credits and things. But ultimately, what you miss, you'll end up making up for at the end of the year when you lodge your tax return. But ultimately, we've got to do some of those variations now to put that money back into people's pockets early.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one. So again, good. Is it great? It's not great. It's just, and is it ingenious? Well, all they've done is bring forward the legislation that was already passed last year, and they've just brought it forward by 12 months.
It was coming anyway. All right. Okay.
So, as I said, good, but not crazy. It's not something that somebody like me sits down and goes, "Oh, that's awesome." So then there's a couple of other interesting ones for business owners, and I love this. Is if it wasn't complicated, and I'm going to have a fair crack at these guys if that's all right, and I do it in jest. I'm not just politician bashing, but look, some of this stuff you just got to go, guys, really? So check this one out. So this is the immediate asset write-offs called full expensing. Now, do you know what full expensing is, Jace?
Well, if you've got an expense, you can write it off in full. Well, that's probably something you do already anyway.
Well, to me, full expensing sounds a lot like the instant tax asset tax write-off. So why the bloody hell would they change the name to something we've never heard before to articulate effectively what they just brought in or just increased 6 months ago?
Well, that's politics, mate. It's politics. It's good PR, right? You got to change the name of it to make it sound exciting and new. Nothing's as good as a change or a holiday as a new name.
So, mate, they've extended this, which is ostensibly, it's the instant asset tax write-off, just dressed up in a new dress, new haircut, new lipstick, and nail polish, and put out there on parade. So, mate, that's another one that small businesses should be looking at because this isn't legislated yet, but full expensing mixed in with, and I wonder if I've put it in the right sequence. Right, it is. So that mixed with the carryback of tax losses. Now, what that effectively means is that businesses, historically, if you made a capital loss in your business, you could carry that forward. And if you made a profit the next year, you can write off the loss against the profit. So if you made a loss of $20,000 last year and you made a profit of $20,000 this year, you write it off and you've got zero profit for that year, for the current year.
Yeah.
Now, what this is proposing is that we actually can go back. So for financial year ending June 30, 2020, which has just been, 21, which is this year, and 22, which is the year after, it's saying that we can go back. Right, we can go back and actually write off any tax losses that we realized this year or last year or next year, and we can write them off and claw back tax that we've already paid in previous years. So this is going to be a really interesting how they legislate this and how they manage it, because immediately I think if you've got multiple different companies, well, you're going to be manufacturing the living daylights out of some losses. Right, you're going to be bleeding.
No, Andy, you wouldn't game the system, would you? No, that has never occurred before. Pink bat scheme.
But so you couple that though with the instant asset write-off, or what I can't even remember what it's called. Full expensing. Right? The write-off in a new dress, we'll call it. So full expensing. So now you've got a position which is really interesting, and it's it's good. And I think that they're intending it this way. I haven't read the brief notes to it, but imagine this. You go out this year and you're scaling up the business via talent and tools and machinery, which means that you actually are manufacturing a loss this year, which would then be able to claw back the tax from last year or the year before in order to compensate you via way of tax return for the loss that you've kind of manufactured. And I don't mean illegally manufactured. I mean that you've gone out, you've resourced the business up, and perhaps you've hit a loss in order to be able to, go from good to great. So it's going to be really interesting, the I's and the T's that get dotted and crossed in and around this as to how you're going to manage it. Because this, like, without the right kind of legislation behind it, like this is Christmas with alcohol on the streets, if you know what I mean. After lockdown.
Well, yeah. Well, and you and I were chatting about this before, and at the end of the day, basically the government, and you said it last week, right? It's jobs, jobs, jobs. Let's come up with 20 different ways that businesses can have plenty of spare cash flow. Now, both you and I, are in business. We're in a pretty unique set of business networks, and those business owners, over and above, some safety capital. You and I have had talks with many of them in the last 6 months. They're like, "Whoa, we're so ready to go for it. We're so ready to invest," right? As soon as I feel safe, as soon as I've got above a buffer, so I reckon, by and large, you're dead right. There'll be a bit of, taking the piss or gouging in that, like, every day of the week. But, if you step back from trying to control that and go, well, where will the money end up? By and large, it'll end up back in the system anyway.
Yes.
They're trying to get it to the business owners by and large, so then they can give it to jobs, right? And, we saw there, both you and I kind of, watched it and we didn't watch it, but, next year, unemployment up to 8%. That's the idea. Looking for a job. That's the one. And, the following year, what they're saying is, right, we want to get employment, under 5%. Like, that's the goal. So basically what they're saying is let's give business owners money in whatever way, shape or form we can. They're just coming up with new, interesting ways to do it. And what we do hope is, by and large, 80% of that money will find its way to buying resources, buying infrastructure, investing in people and jobs. That's pretty well what they're saying. They're going, well, we can't control it very well, so let's just kind of like toss it over the fence and hope it lands kind of roundabout right. You know what I mean? So,
and
yeah.
This is where I think it's clever. This is where I actually think if they designed it with where my brain went to immediately, which they might say, hang on, Andy, where your brain went to is is absolutely not in the intention of the pending legislation, but it may well be, because I mean, they're not silly, so we're not that silly. So you're dead right. It's if you ask the question, how do we stop doing helicopter money and get small to medium business to put the helicopter money out there? Which isn't helicopter, right? It's green energy. It is renewable via its nature.
Well, it's a bit more targeted and discretionary, right? It's like, I need a new person to work for me to grow my business so I can contribute, right? Yeah, dead right. Yeah.
So if that was the intention, then I think that they will potentially just let it run, and they'll go, we don't care if you abuse it, because you abuse it, and then yes, you'll get the tax back from us, but that's 10 times, but you're going to inject a hell of a lot of money into jobs and a hell of a lot of money into the economy, and that's 10 times more beneficial to get things moving than us just going over and dropping paper from the sky. So look, I think, as I said, it's really going to be interesting how they legislate it, because that will show you what their intention is. But the most excited I got throughout the budget. And then this is my final one. Like, there are other points that we could talk about, but if we go to the highlight reel, this is my highlight. That's my highlight reel. So the job maker, and we're going to hear so much talk about this. And again, this is going to be, how do they implement this? Because as soon as just think about Black Lives Matter, just think about you know, the women's movement in occupations, in the workforce. Think about the big steps forward we've taken in anti-discrimination, right? The big giant leaps that we've taken, right? Or some would say baby steps, right? Depending on who you are. But I'd say over the last 100 years, it's been a leap. Could move faster, should move faster. But anyway, I'm not here to argue that. So listen to this as an employer, right? Wage subsidy available to eligible employers who hire eligible younger job seekers between 7th of October, which was budget, and 6th of October. So wage subsidy if you hire specific people between the ages of 16 and 29 who have been on job seeker, you get $200 per week. That's 10 grand a year. If they're between the ages of 30 and 35, that's $100 per week, which is obviously circa 5K. So as a business owner, I remember when sitting down with the HR lawyers and managers while you get your paperwork drawn up and your job adverts and all of these sorts of things for the talent that you're recruiting, and you get sat down, you go, okay, so what can I and can I not ask? Well, you can't ask their age, Andy. You're not allowed to do that. Why is that? Well, that's discrimination. You can't discriminate on age for somebody. That's going to make things fucking hard for this, isn't it? Because you're not going to know.
Totally. Yeah.
And then beyond that, they have to be at least 1 month on job seeker. So not only that, they have to have been in the program on the system because it's there to relieve the pressure on the government. So now not only can we not ask their age, we then have to be able to ask another question, which we're not allowed to ask, which is, have you been on welfare? And if so, for how long? And here's the thing though, Jason, and if they say no, you go, oh, sorry.
Got for you.
So I'm
sorry,
sure
mate, can't do the interview.
I'm sure they've got some ideas about how they're going to deploy this. My thoughts are one or two. My thoughts are that you will have an eligibility status that you are allowed to project when going for employment. And so effectively, I think that you'll find people bidding almost. So if they don't mandate some, because otherwise it's just discrimination, right? You can't avoid that. There's age discrimination built into this. So I think that they'll be given like a QR code. Maybe they'll burn it into their foreheads or something. They'll do that down in Victoria. That's what Dan Andrews will do. We'll have little tattooed patches on our wrist. But,
you'll have chips. Yeah.
He'll chip us up. CCs, you can't say no, Mr. Andrews. So I think that they'll have to figure out some sort of a system where they can telegraph this when going for employment, or allow us for a period of time to specifically target that part of the workforce. But in that itself, that is discrimination. It is not the best person getting the job. It is the most subsidized person getting the job. And the other thing is that school leavers and things like that won't be eligible because they won't have been on JobKeeper.
Part of the budget I saw there, Andy, there's that, they're going to make it easier for school leavers to get to uni, right? So they're going to fill those uni slots from, potentially overseas students that aren't going to be here for 12 months. They're going to make it easier and cheaper for, local kids to get into uni and subsidize it a bit more. So, there's a little bit of thinking around it, whether it'll practically play out or not, who's to tell. It'll be a really interesting one to see for sure, man.
From a business perspective, it's exciting, and I am playing around because I think it's a good budget. Right? I think it's a good budget. I'm just having a bit of fun with it. But as a business owner, you've got to sit back and go, this is an incredible opportunity. And for outsourced businesses, you've got to be very, very careful. Because you look at the team in the Philippines, and that would equate to that discount if you're looking in around that sort of $40,000-$50,000, then all of a sudden it becomes comparable to outsourced activity offshore. So that'll be really interesting, and I think you'll see a lot of businesses think quite critically about this, because if you did want to expand into a certain area and you'd reserve some funds to do a project or an activity, you can actually now resource a lot of talents to maybe relieve other talent from more administrative duties so they can focus up. Like there's a lot of opportunity here over that 12-month period, and so executed well, I think that'll go really well. And
totally, mate. So no, I was reading an excellent article actually. You know, it was actually written. It was on the ABC News the other day about, you know, the debt. Okay, so you know, like, you know, you've said this quite often that Australia's, you know, position in, you know, worldwide economics is actually quite a safe one, quite a good one. You know, our banking systems in the world are in the top 5 banking systems stability in the world. You know, and so, you know, as a country, not only are we a desirable place to live, our banking system, which underwrites, you know, economic safety in all most countries of the world, you know, banking is safe. You know, our government, by and large, other than, you know, your opinions on certain individuals, you know, they run a pretty good ship. You know, by and large, nothing like the interesting show that's going on in America or the UK. But, you know, so really at the end of the day, we've got a pretty good country. But, you know, $1 trillion, you know, people are like, oh, shit, you know, that's just mad. That's just crazy. I think I've got it here. Where is it? There it is there. This article I read the other day, and it's a brilliant article, and it's probably the best article I've ever read on just basically like laying it up. There, here's what it is, right? So it's an interesting one, and actually blew my mind, and I'll talk to that in a minute, right? So for those guys who are still listening right now, and certainly from the property game, you know, those ones who sort of, you know, over the positive real estate space, right now it's the cheapest money as a property investor I've ever seen. You know, it's the cheapest lending a property investor has seen in over 20 years. Andy, you and I have talked about that ages. We've got the graph, you know. So it makes sense that if it's the cheapest lending for property investors, then, you know, maybe it's the cheapest lending for other people too. And this article pointed something out very, very interestingly, which I thought was pretty cool. I'll go through it for a second. Actually, I'll just quickly show you something here. Andy, have you heard of term financing facilities? You know, so domestic bonds, offshore bonds, you know, domestic bonds. Yeah, there you go. The bond yield, you know, down she goes, right? So right now, you know, it's an interesting thing that the Australian bond market is, you know, pretty cheap. Like that, those bonds are low cost, which means then they can be exchanged for some other borrowing or debt. And you know, is $1 trillion a bad idea? Is it a big problem? And the answer, technically, financially, is no. The answer is, and this article points out that, matter of fact, the government probably should be borrowing $2 trillion. Because it's the cheapest money ever in Australia's. I think in here I'll go through it in a minute. I think in the 2,000-year history of tracking government bond and lending, it's the cheapest money being borrowed at a government level in 2,000 years. So imagine, Andy, and this is where this article kind of goes, well, actually, I don't think they're going far enough. I don't think they're borrowing enough money and investing enough money into key pieces of infrastructure for Australia's future. It's a bit lowbrow. It's a bit like, let's get Bob a job. Well, how about high-speed rail from Adelaide to Cairns? How about, you know, this? How about, you know, the biggest Tesla battery factory in the world in Alice Springs? How about, you know, and it was a brilliant article because this is the way I think about debt as a property investor. I'm like, bloody hell, if debt's cheap and I can get a return on it, why not? And I'll quickly take you through that.
You need people with vision And this is fundamental. This is a problem of leadership that Australia's had since Howard, and I don't want to be Liberal or Labor here, because I reckon Hawke was a bit of a freak as well. Not talking to policy, just talking to leadership and leadership and vision. And we spoke about this the other day, that you always think that politicians are smarter or when you were younger and all of that sort of jazz. But when you can't see past a 4-year term, of which 1 year is absorbed with campaigning and inauguration, so you've effectively got 3 years, then these massive infrastructure projects, that they just don't get a look in, because here's the thing, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? And unfortunately, when you can't answer that question in a 4-year term, these things don't get done.
Mate, so, what's Australia's number one problem for its... okay. Let me ask a better question. What's its number one resource problem in Australia that if we managed better, we could expand the population and occupy more of the country?
People would be my number one.
But people who live there need water, right? Drought is a big issue in Australia, and we're a very arid country, right? So in the north of Western Australia, there's a thing called the Ord River Project, right? I don't know if you know much about this, Andy, but in the wet season, every 1 minute, the volume of Sydney Harbour water flows to the ocean. Right. So
it has its own tide. It's that big.
Yeah, it's that fucking big. And Joe Bjelke-Petersen and a couple of other mad politicians from 20, 30 years ago had these visions of creating water networks from the north of Australia and bringing them all the way down to the south and into the centre, and making Australia great in that way. Not necessarily in Trump's way, but water brings and we've got more water we can poke a stick at. It's just going out to sea.
Management.
Yep. So, so imagine that. Imagine completing the Ord River network. Imagine completing the 137, dam project of Joe Bjelke-Petersen. Imagine making, turning, Alice Springs into a city of 5 million people that now farms, 25,000 square million miles of, desert, because, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we're getting a bit big vision, but it's a vision that's interesting.
Well, here's the thing:
imagine the jobs from that, Andy.
I actually know a bit about the Lake Argyle and the Ord River system from work I did with the agribusiness businesses back. Oh God, it was a while ago now, maybe 10 years plus, working in the tax structuring of them, and so went up to Lake Argyle, learnt a lot about the system up there. So when that was done, so that was 83 when that was dammed up, and it almost didn't get done because they think that they were possibly going to make a snail extinct, and that's a true story. Here's the other thing, which is alleged at the moment, but I believe it to be true because it came from a very reputable source up there, is that an Aboriginal, so they've got a gas pipeline that goes all the way from there, from up at Lake Argyle, all the way down to WA. And an Aboriginal elder said, should put some water pipes in there. There's going to be a major drought. And of course, nobody listens to the Aboriginal elders, and so they think, well, no, why would we build 2 pipes when we can build 1? Again, that short-sighted thinking. And so sure enough, and you're 100% right, and that's in the dry season that it drains out that quickly. And so if you tapped into that system, then literally you for our population, we would have more water than we would know what to do with. So you then think about the deployment of the desalination plant, which was a $1 billion, $8 billion mess, which never really got online and only services a local area. This problem with vision is, and that's the reason why we love Elon Musk so much, is because that next level kind of vision. And the challenge is that we just don't have that in Australian politics at the moment. Nobody looks past their future paycheck or their government pension.
Yeah, no, you're dead right. And it's and to be honest, Winston Churchill said, never waste a good, not disaster, crisis. And maybe just after reading this article, I think they're wasting a good crisis. Maybe, if they're going to be remembered, they should be remembered for something crazy amazing. But, this article has said, does it matter that the Commonwealth debt is going to be $1 trillion or more? And this argument is well, no, it doesn't matter. Compared to the rest of the world, we're still one of the lowest, debt to GDP ratios in the world. So our country is extremely healthy in that respect. Japan's got 150% GDP ratio. Ours is going to be, around about that 40 to 43% at the peak. And, within a decade, there's plans to get it down, which is super cool. But, between 1939 and 1946, you love this stuff when it comes to, the war, it rose to 150%, 120%. So, we've been there before. We've done this thing. And is there a risk of interest rates rising? Well, that's unlikely for probably a good decade, I reckon now, or in any significant way. And so too do many other people talk about that. But check this out. Never in 2,000 years of recorded history of interest rates has it been cheaper for governments to borrow. 2,000 years.
What was
2,000 years?
What was it like back then, Jason? You might remember.
I was like, is that a typo? Is that 200 years or 2,000 years? But you know what? That puts it in perspective, which I love, Andy, because this is not a new concept. It's been around for 2,000 years. A government borrows from the Iron Bank. The Iron Bank, mate. It reminds me of
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. Money from the Iron Bank. But it's true.
What I find particularly fascinating about that statistic, Jason, is so 2001 year ago, was it cheaper for banks to
maybe it was cheaper in 2001 years. What's the interest on $1 trillion, David said? That's a really good question, David. And this article sort of shows about what this sort of looks like. So here's an example of how the government raised the money, David. X $1 billion with a 10-year term of 2% interest. X $1 billion, with where is it is a 1.5% interest, maturing in 30 years. All of those sorts of things. Actually, it's down here. I'll show you. So, this is the bonds that they're buying. Maturing at a 1% interest. 15 billion. 30 years away at 1.75% interest. And that's just a fraction of the bond trading. But David, it's a great question. And Andy, it's a question of productivity. So if you take this borrowed money, let's say by and large, you wash it all up and it's 3% for $1 trillion. If the government puts that money into the economy in smart ways, and our GDP grows by 3%, or our return grows, like you're ahead of the game, aren't you? I'm talking positive cash flow. If I borrow money as a property investor at 3% and I get a 7% return on my property, mate, I'm borrowing till the cows come home. I'm on. It's on like Donkey Kong, right? And this, it just really made me realize that, wow, this is interesting. I've never really drilled into the world of this stuff before like this myself, but I've always thought this way for my own world of property investing. Why would it be any different to the government borrowing money to invest in the economy? Because they're going to get a return. I'm sure there's a way to sort of measure a return better than my very shallow understanding of it. But if you invested $1 trillion, the return on the interest of that next year or the year after, Andy, should be pretty good, I'd think, It
would be, but you've got to realise that the government actually play the game of business pretty much like this guy tries to slam dunk the ball. Right? It's a swing and a miss, right? They're not historically well known for how well they do business.
I actually think they recognise that, and I think that's why they're giving you and me and many other more appropriate people the guardianship of that money rather than themselves, to be honest. So it's probably a good bet that if they give the business owners and the people in our economy some extra money, that will then turn into jobs, attraction, taxes, and stuff in the future. So mate, so listen, I have to dash today. I've got a family commitment this evening in about 30 minutes. So we thought it might be, we were going to try and get going early, but we were a little bit late because of a technical glitch. But
and we didn't know what time it was.
Old daylight savings caught us on the hop. But I might sort of take my leave, Andy, and I think we might even take this one up again next week. I'm pretty sure there's plenty more for us to sort of, talk about. Yep, you've got the debt clock in the US is going. I love it.
We can have a little bit of a chat about that because that this is something that's been ticking along for a little while, and look, I think it's going to be something of interest, and I reckon that there's a lot more to chat about the budget and to chat about as this becomes legislated. There's a huge amount in it for investors. There's a huge amount in it for business owners. And when I say a huge amount is that if you play your cards right, it's about understanding, what's coming, the impacts of how that's going to transpire. And so the one bit of advice that I gave a group of business owners early this morning on a finance call was you got to take responsibility. You got to step up to the plate now and go, okay, I'm going to be knowledgeable. If you're a property investor, be knowledgeable in property. Get the information, understand things. Like the things are happening so quickly that your intermediaries are almost not going to have enough time to digest the information en masse. So it's your responsibility to be quite proactive in that. And we'll try and share as much as we can from here. Because we love dissecting it, and we see that there's incredible opportunities that are going to be there. As much as it's been a very, very difficult 6 months, it's a very, very exciting period for the next 12. If nothing else, other than just figuring out how to work the system in order to turn things around.
Mate, dead right. And I said this one the other day on a live that I did. Last bit of pontification here. For me, there's only one last piece right now of the puzzle to indicate an absolute frenzy of property market momentum, and that's immigration and population, right? Once they solve that one, everything else is in play. The lowest interest rates ever. It's the lowest vacancy rates in every city we have seen in a decade except Melbourne right now. And Melbourne's only temporary. You give that 6 months in, it'll be back to sub 2% vacancy rate.
Because everyone living in Queensland?
There's 26,000 people who have moved from Melbourne and Sydney to Queensland in the last 4 months. Yep, we're out. So, mate, right now, temporarily, Queensland's on like Donkey Kong, 22,000 jobs in Canberra. Canberra's on. Canberra and Queensland are receiving the internal population boom that is pushing property prices. It's on already in those two locations. And then Melbourne and Sydney will absolutely explode the moment overseas migration is back on. And
you and I heard via the grapevine, we won't mention the place, or like it was in Queensland, we won't mention exactly where because it might give their game away, but what was it, a 20 minutes FaceTime and a $12 million sale well over market value of the property. That was in Queensland. So this is the kind of stuff that's happening, which is just outrageous on so many levels.
And I think, Andy, my call in real estate, we are well underway for positioning of the next boom movement of real estate. It's going to be a quality boom movement, not a quantity boom movement. That's our call. The rubbish will be left behind and the quality will just accelerate. Those who bought rubbish properties might want to rethink the rubbish they've got in their portfolios and replace it with better things. But mate, yep, some good stuff to talk about next Friday, mate. I'm pumped. I'm excited to run off and see the Suns school thing tonight, but I'm excited to hang out with you and talk a little bit more because I feel like we were getting a bit of our mojo on there. But for those who've dialed in tonight, thank you for dialing in, everybody. And great to have you guys tuning in with us. But listen, circle around next Friday, and Andy and I will do some more on it. Andy, you want to take it away with the final credits? You got the thanks for the wine and wisdom.
Happy
Have a good one.